Welcome back everyone. In this lesson we are going to be setting up our item data structure. This is going to be the first step in setting up the items and then eventually the inventory system that we're going to create. So the way this is going to work is we are going to have a number of different scripts which are going to be resources, and again a resource is simply a file here in the file system that we can create. So we're going to create one for each of our different items. And these resources are going to be of one of four types, and we may have more in the future as well if you want different item types. So we're going to start with our base item data script, which is going to contain information such as the name, description, icon, max stack size, if it can be stacked or not, and a couple other things. This is then going to branch out into a number of different inherited subclasses. One for weapon item data, which is going to represent all of our weapons, and this is then going to have some code that runs the ability to equip it when clicked on. Same thing for our shield, and then consumable item data for things that the player can essentially eat or drink, so things like health boosts or food. So now let's jump in and start with the item data script. So what we're going to do is go to our scripts folder, and we're going to create a brand new folder here called items. And inside of items, we are going to create a brand new script. So this script is going to be called item data. And inside this script, what we're going to do is start off by extending not from node, but from resource. This is going to allow us to create it here in the file system. Then what we're going to do is we're going to give it a class name of item data. Now, if we go over into the file system, let's go ahead and create it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a brand new folder here. I'm going to call it items. Make sure this is inside of the root folder. And then in here, I'm going to create two more folders. I'm going to create one called weapons, and then I'm going to create one called consumables. Now inside the weapons folder, we are going to create an arrow, as an arrow isn't going to really be a weapon or a consumable or a shield. It's just going to be of the base item data because it doesn't need any special code or any special variables to go along with it. So inside of weapons, we're going to create a brand new resource. And if we search for item data, you can see right here, I'm going to create that, and I'm simply going to call this arrow. Now, inside of weapons, you'll see we have the arrow.tres file, which if we double click on it, is going to open it up in the inspector. Now we can create variables that we can reference here inside the inspector by exporting them. So back inside of our script, we're going to create those variables. The first one is going to be an export variable called display name, and this of course is going to be the name of the item that we want to display in the inventory and when the player hovers over it. We then want to have an export variable for the description. This is going to just give a brief description of what the item is and what it can do. We then want a integer variable called max stack size, and this is just going to determine what is the maximum number of this item we can stack in an inventory before it has to be divided up into separate stacks. So for example, our weapons, we might want to just have a stack size of 1, so we cannot stack weapons on top of each other. But things such as arrows and consumables, we might want to stack up to 16 or 20, for example. We then want an export variable for icon of type texture, and this is going to be the icon that is displayed in our UI. And then we want another export variable called equip scene. Now, equip scene is not going to be used by every item type. For example, the arrow is not going to be using an equip scene because we can't equip an arrow. Likewise, we also are not going to be able to equip a consumable, but this variable is still going to be here as it's going to be used by our weapon and shield subclasses. Now that is all the variables we need for this script, and you can actually see them over here in the inspector being displayed right there. We're not going to go ahead and create the one function, as that is going to be something we'll create in the future once we have our inventory system set up. But if we select our arrow here and go to the inspector, we can fill in its details. Display name, we'll go arrow. Description, we'll just say shot by a bow. Max stack size, let's maybe make this 30. We can then give it an icon, so if we go down to our sprites, items, we can drag in the item arrow here, and equip scene we're going to leave as empty. Now, we need to then create 3 subclasses here which are going to inherit from item data, and these are going to be, as before, the weapon item data, shield item data, and consumable item data. So let's start with weapon item data. So here in the items script folder, we're going to create a brand new script, call this one weapon item data. And inside this script, we are not going to do a lot here. Essentially, all we're going to be doing is overriding or extending from item data. So here we'll go extends item data. So we now have access to all those variables and functions. And we're going to give it a class name of weapon item data. Okay. So yeah, that's all we're going to do here. So you may be wondering why we're doing this in the first place. Well, the reason why is because there are two main ways that we can categorize our items. We can do that via enumerators, which is basically a list of the different item types, and we can assign that via the script, or we can have our categories defined by class. And this is probably a better way as it's more expandable and it's more strict in the sense that if we want to equip a weapon later on, we don't have to specify we want to equip an item data as we might accidentally try and equip an arrow or equip a health potion, but rather we can say we want to equip specifically a weapon item data, and that is going to prevent any sort of errors that may occur if we try and equip the wrong type of thing. So now what we're going to do is we are going to go back to items. We're going to create a brand new script here, and this one is going to be called shield item data. Shield item data. And just like with our weapon, we simply want to extend that from item data and then give that the class name of shield item data. And this again is going to do the exact same thing. It's going to be mainly here for categorization, as well as it's going to have a function in the future that is going to equip it when selected in the inventory. And then finally, we have one more item type, which is going to be consumable item data. So consumable item data. We can then open this up. Now this one's going to be a bit different as this is actually going to have a variable. So first of all, extend item data, and then we want to give it the class name of consumable item data. And the one variable we're going to give is going to be an export variable called health gain. And this is going to be the amount of health that will be received when this consumable is consumed. And it's also going to have a sound effect that we're going to add later on, which is also going to play. So now what we need to do is go ahead and simply create all of our items now. So inside of our items folder, I am going to go ahead and create a consumable here. So we'll create a new resource. And you can see if we type item data, we have all the sub item datas as well. So we'll create a new consumable. I'm simply going to call this one health potion. And inside of this item data, we can simply go health gain. Let's say we'll keep that at about 2. Display name, health potion. Description, we can go +2 health. And then max stack size, let's maybe make this a stack size of 12. The icon, we can go down to our sprites items and drag in the health potion here. And equip scene is not going to be anything. Now let's look at how we can create a weapon which will have an equip scene assigned. So if we go to weapons and create a brand new resource of type weapon item data, we are going to call this one our sword. And inside of sword, we are simply going to call it one sword. For the description, we might just go light weapon with quick attacks. The max stack size is going to be 1 as we don't want our weapons actually stacking on top of one another. The icon, we can go down and get our sword icon right here. And then for the equip scene, this is going to be in our scenes folder inside of weapons, that weapon sword scene right here. So we'll drag that on like so. Now, between now and the next lesson, I want you to go ahead and set up the item datas for our bow, axe, and shield, but make sure of the shield you are using the shield item data resource. So have a go at that, and I'll see how you're done in the next lesson. Alright, so I hope you had a go at that challenge. As you can see, I've already gone ahead and created the axe item data here, which has the display name, description, everything else set up as well. And do make sure that this is of type weapon item data. Same thing for the bow down here. I've gone ahead and created that as well, adding in all the details. And then finally, we need the shield. So I'm just going to create a new resource here of type shield item data. And this one is going to be called shield. And for this, we can then simply give it a display name of shield, a description of blocks incoming attacks, and then we can give it the icon. So we'll give it the shield icon, and then for the equip scene, we'll give it shield. And there we go. So that is all the items we're going to have set up for now. You can of course go ahead and create more if you wish, more consumables, more weapons, more items of other kinds. And in the next lesson, we're going to look at how we can begin collecting these and having the player store them inside an inventory. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you all then. Welcome back everyone. In this lesson, we are going to begin setting up our inventory. So this is going to be controlled by one script that is going to be attached to the player as a node. So let's begin with that script. So here in the file system, I'm going to go down to scripts and create a new folder called inventory. And then inside of this, we are going to create a new script, of course, called inventory. Now, inside of this script, what we're going to do is we are going to extend from node. It doesn't have to be node 2D or anything specific because this isn't going to be a node that has any visual sprites or anything that moves around or interacts in the game world. It's just going to act as a data node, which contains data and a script. We'll then give it a class name of inventory. Now, in terms of variables and stuff, we actually are going to create something interesting at first. We're going to create our own subclass inside of this one. So I'm going to write it out first, just so we can see what it looks like. So I'll go class, item slot, and I'm going to give it two variables. A variable called item of type item data, and one of quantity of type int. Now what I'm doing here is creating a brand new class. So just like inventory, just like enemy, player, character, those are all classes. So too is item slot. And all this class has inside of it is an item variable and a quantity variable. Now for each slot in our inventory, we are going to have its own item slot class representing that slot. So for example, in each slot, we can then specify an item and then how much of that item is in that slot. Now, we'll be using that in just a second, but first let's create our signals. These are going to be our events that get run when certain things happen. So here we're going to have a signal called updated inventory, and this is going to be called whenever something in the inventory changes. So when a new item is added, when an item is removed, this is going to be called. Then we're going to have another signal here called updated slot, which is going to be called when a specific slot has been updated, and it's going to send over that slot as a parameter, item slot right here, and there we go. Now in terms of variables, we can have a variable called item slots, and this is going to be of type array, and it's going to be containing item slots inside like so. Now, that is really the only variable that we're going to be using behind the scenes, but we're going to have two export variables. The first one is going to be an export variable called size, and we're going to make of type int, and this is going to be equal to 9 by default. This essentially is just going to be how large our inventory will be at the start. So for example, 9 means we're going to have 9 slots. We then want another export variable, and this one is going to be called start items. And this is going to basically define all the items we want the player to start with. And this is going to be of type dictionary. And this dictionary is going to have a key called item data and a value of type int. So essentially what we're doing here is this dictionary is going to have the item that we want to add as well as its quantity. Now we can get started on our functions. So the first function we're going to have is going to be ready, of course, which gets called at the start. And in here is where we are going to create our slots and then add our start items. We then want another function. This one is going to be called add item. And add item has a parameter of item data, which gets sent over, and essentially this here is going to try and add this item to our inventory. Now the reason why it is returning a boolean is because if, for example, the inventory is full and we can't add the item, we want to inform whatever called this that is the case, so it will return false. Otherwise, if it was successfully added, it is going to return true. And here I'll just go return false until we add in some code for that. The next function we're going to have is going to be the remove item function, which does the exact opposite. We send over an item data resource and it is going to remove it from the inventory. Okay, it's going to basically find the first one it can and then remove it. But if we want to be a bit more specific, we could call remove item from slot, which is a function that is going to remove one item from the specified slot. So for example, when we want to consume something and we click on that specific slot, we're going to send over the slot to then remove it from the inventory rather than just removing the first of that item it finds. Okay, and then after this we have our next function, which is going to be get item from slot. And this right here is going to essentially search through all of our item slots here. And when it finds that one of those slots contains the specified item, it is going to return it. And for now, we're just going to go return null. And this is going to be used for when we want to begin adding items to our inventory, because remember, we do want to stack the items if they can be stacked. We have get empty item slot, and this right here is essentially going to return an item slot that is currently empty, because if we want to add a new item to a new slot, we need to of course find that empty slot, and this here is going to do it. If there are no empty slots, so if everything is full, it is just going to return null. And then finally we have one more function, which is going to be called has item. Has item, we essentially send over the item data and it returns true or false for whether or not it is inside the inventory. Okay, this is going to be useful for our bow when we are shooting, because we can only shoot if there are arrows in our inventory, and this is going to be useful for that. So now that we have all of our functions set up, let's go through and begin actually setting it up. So here inside of add item, what we're going to do is, first of all, we need a slot to actually add the item to. So for this, I'm going to create a variable called slot of type item slot, and this is going to be equal to get item slot, and we're going to send over the item that we want to add. Now, the reason why we're doing this is because if there is an item slot that already contains this item, we may be able to stack it. So that's what we're doing here. Then what we're going to do is check to see if slot exists, so if slot, and if the slot quantity is less than the item.max stack size. Then we're simply going to increase the slot's quantity by 1. So slot.quantity plus equals 1. So that's great if we have, for example, a bunch of arrows that we're picking up. It essentially is going to stack one arrow on top of the other here. But what happens if, for example, we pick up an item that has a max stack size of 1, or we pick up an item and the slot we are getting here is already full? Well, if that is the case, then this else statement is going to run. And here what we're going to do is go slot equals get empty slot. So this is then going to find a slot that is empty. But what, for example, happens if this slot is null? What if we have no empty slots? Well, we can just go if not slot. So if slot is null, then we are going to return false, basically telling called this function that, hey, we were unsuccessful in adding the item. So for example, if this is a dropped item that we go to pick up, we don't want to destroy it if we were not able to add it to our inventory. Otherwise, that would be a bit unfair. So otherwise, if we are able to get an empty slot, what we're going to do is go slot.item equals item, item like so, and then slot.quantity equals 1. And then outside of this if statement, we then want to call our two signals right here. So we'll go updated inventory.emit, and we'll also go updated slot.emit, sending over the slot. And then finally, since everything was successful, we want to return true. Okay, and there we go. So this is our add item function. Essentially, it is going to search for a slot that already exists with the item. If it is able to stack on top of it, it will do so. Otherwise, it is going to find an empty slot and add the item to that. Now down here in remove item, we essentially want to do the opposite. So first of all, what we need to do is check to see if this item actually is inside the inventory or not, because if it's not, there's no point in trying to remove it. So here we're simply going to go if not has item of item, then return. So essentially, if this item is not in the inventory, don't do anything. Otherwise, we'll create a variable called slot of type item slot equals get item slots of item. So if the item is in the inventory, we're going to find it, and then we're going to remove from that specific slot. So we're going to remove item from slot. So this remove item function is pretty bare bones. The real meat of removing an item is going to be down here in remove item from slot. So inside of remove item from slot, we're actually going to be filling this in the next lesson. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you all then. Welcome back, everyone. In this lesson, we're going to continue on with our inventory script. So down here inside of remove item from slot, we essentially want to get this current item slot here that we sent over and remove an item from that. So first of all, what we want to do is just check to see if this slot actually has an item in it. If there is no item in the slot, then there's nothing to remove, so we can return. So if not slot.item, then return. Otherwise, we're going to check to see if the quantity is equal to 1, because if so, that means we can essentially remove the item from this slot entirely. So if slot.quantity equals 1, then we can go slot.item equals null. Otherwise, that means the quantity is above 1. So then what we're going to do is just go slot.quantity minus equals 1. And then finally, we want to call the update inventory and update slot signals here. Next, what we're going to do is fill in the get item slot. This function right here is going to return an item slot containing the specified item right here. So essentially what we're going to do is loop through all of our item slots in the item slots array. And let's go ahead and do that now. So here we'll go for slot in item slots. And for each slot, we're simply just going to check to see if the item in that slot is equal to the item that was sent over. So here we'll go if slot.item equals item, then return slot. Now, if we've got to the end of the for loop and we have not found that item, we are simply going to return null, as we have not found that item, so return nothing. That down here inside of get empty item slot, we kind of want to do the opposite. We want to find a slot with no item in it. So for this, what we're going to do is again loop through each of our slots. So we'll go for slot in item slots, and for each item slot, we're simply going to check to see if there is no item attached to it. So if slot.item equals null, then return that slot. Otherwise, again, if we've reached the end of the for loop and we have not found anything, we are going to return null. And then finally, has item. Now, has item, we want to search through each item slot to see if that slot contains this item. So here, we're just going to go for slot in item slots. And for each item slot, we're going to go if slot.item equals item, then return true. Otherwise, again, at the end of the for loop, we're going to return false. And there we go. That right there is our entire inventory script setup. All we need to do now is go to the top and fill in the ready function. So inside of ready, what we're going to do is two things. First of all, we are going to create our slots, and then we are going to add our start items. So to create the slots, what we're going to do is essentially loop, have a for loop that goes over our size. So here we'll go for I in range of size. So this for loop is going to run 9 times. And inside of here, we simply want to go item slots.append item slot.new, and that is how we can essentially instantiate or initialize a brand new instance of the class. So here we go item slot.new, and that is going to create a new instance of the item slot class and add it to the item slots array right here. Then for adding the starting items, what we want to do is essentially loop through all of the elements inside of start items dictionary. So that is done pretty much in the same way as we do with a normal for loop. So here I'll go for key in start items. Now key is going to be referencing the item, okay, because in a dictionary you have a key and a value. The key is always going to be unique, and the value can be whatever you want. So the key for our start items is going to be the item data, and the value is going to be the quantity of that item as an integer. So here we are simply getting each key inside of our start items. So what we're going to do here then is loop through its value. So for example, if the start item here is arrow and the key is going to be 5, we then want to loop 5 times and add the item 5 times. So here we will then go for I in range of start items and in square brackets key, because remember, in a dictionary we don't access elements via an index number but rather by its specific key. And then what we're going to do is we are going to go add item and add the key, which is going to essentially be the item data. So there we go. That is the entire inventory script now finished. We have all the code we're going to ever have for this. Now let's set it up. So over inside of our player scene, let's open that one up. What we're going to do is go into our scene and add in a brand new node. So it will just be a default node like this, and I'm going to rename it to inventory. Now we can attach the inventory script, and you can see here we can give it a size, so I'll make it 9, and then for start items we can add those. But let's just press play to make sure that it actually runs correctly. And there we go, no errors, so we're all good. Now for our start items, let's go ahead and add in a couple of these. So we'll click on the dictionary to open it up, and you see we need to specify an item data and then a quantity. So if we go to items, let's go down to weapons. I'm going to drag an arrow, and I'm going to give us 10 of these. Click add key value pair, and we can do the same for as many things as we wish. So we might then want to add in a bow, one of those. We might then want to add in a shield, one of those, and the same thing for everything else, okay? Now, we're not going to actually be able to see this displayed in game yet because we don't actually have our UI added. So let's add maybe 12 health potions, and there we go. So again, if I press play, you will notice that nothing appears. So in the next lesson, what we're going to do is begin setting up our inventory UI. So we can not only see the items in our inventory, but also have the ability to interact with them, equip them, use them, and do whatever we wish to do with them. So that's what we're going to begin working on in the next lesson.